When studying for certification exams such as your Network Plus, make sure to do a lot of practice questions. I recommend 500 plus. 500 to 700 plus practice questions is good enough to make sure you know it. And make sure the questions are scattered across all the exam objectives. In this video, I'm going to be doing 100 of those practice questions with you that is scattered across almost all of the exam objectives, in particularly the Network Plus N10-009. I'm Andrew Ramdial, and I have been teaching certification exams over the last 24 plus years now. I've taken over 100 exams, have over 60 certification. I was a former pen tester, system administrator, and network administrator for a long period of time. Let's go ahead and get started. By the way, I do have some of the best-selling, highest-rated courses on the Udemy platform for CompTIA products, and I've taught hundreds of thousands of students. So if you haven't studied for Network Plus, check out my courses. All the links in the description below. And if you want more practice questions, I also have a practice question course that has about close to 600 practice questions. Again, check in the description below. Let's get started. So the way we're going to be doing this is I'm going to display the questions on this white section of the screen, and then I'm going to read it, and I'm just going to go straight into answering it. If you want to practice along with me, here's what I suggest. Go ahead and the moment you see the question, pause the video, read the question on your own, answer it, and then I will go over it and tell you why this answer is an answer and why these choices are good or bad. So with that in mind, let's knock this out. I know that's what you're here for. Now this video is going to be long because we're going to be doing 100 practice questions. So make sure to get yourself something nice to drink, and let's knock this out. Let's get started. Question number 1 of 100. Okay, it says here, which of the following best describes the importance of a DHCP relay agents in a network? A, they manage the IP address. They manage the IP address lease time for the devices on the network. They provide backup DHCP services in case the primary server fails. They allow a DHCP server to assign IP addresses to devices on the same subnet. They forward DHCP requests and responses between clients and servers across different subnets. Now, let's take a look here. The answer is D. Okay, first of all, what is a DHCP server? DHCP relay agents. So when you have a DHCP server, generally it's bound to one network. It sits in one network and it assigns IP addresses within that single network. If you want a DHCP server to assign IP addresses to multiple different subnets, you're going to have to set up these relay agents on your routers and then set them up on your servers also. So that's why D is absolutely correct. Let's go through why these are incorrect. They manage the lease time. Incorrect. The DHCP server is what manages the lease time. When you configure the lease on the DHCP server, you set the lease time. In the course, in the labs, I show you how to do that. They provide a backup service. They're not a backup service. Okay, if you want a backup DHCP service, you have to set up another server or another lease. They allow the DHCP server to assign IP address to device on the same subnet. No, the DHCP server does that by its default configuration. All right, that is why D is absolutely correct, because remember now for your exam, the DHCP server relay agents or DHCP relay agents allows you to assign IP addresses to multiple subnets from a single server. Question number 2. I had something similar to this on my actual exam. Which of the following DNS record types is used to map a domain name to an IPv4 address? Answer here is going to be an A record. Now, when you look at a DNS server, you're going to have all different types of records. So a quad A record or AAAA record, this is going to be doing what's known as domain names to IPv6 IP addresses. Remember what a DNS server does. It basically translates domain names to IP address. So a quad A record is a V6, and an A record is basically a domain name to an IPv4 address. An MX record is what you're going to use to do mail records. So, for example, when you send something to bob@microsoft.com, when it hits the DNS server, that it knows, okay, what record in the DNS server points to the mail server? Anytime the DNS server sees that @ sign, it knows, okay, I'm going to look for the MX record. So the MX record points to the IP address of or the domain name of the actual mail server. A CNAME record is a way to rename a domain name. So this has nothing to do with IP addresses, and the MX are emails. All right, best answer here, of course, was D. Question number 3. Which protocol is used by the session layer to manage communication sessions between network devices? Now, on your exam, you're going to have a lot of questions on your OSI model. In fact, it's the first thing they cover in the exam objectives. Make sure you understand what protocol operates at what part of the OSI. In the course, you notice I gave you a handout that tells you different protocols at different layers. Make sure you know that handout. So the answer here is going to be RPC. Remote procedure call is basically a session type protocol that maintains a session between two machines, versus HTTP, FTP, and SMTP. These are actually used in the application layer. HTTP is used to send web pages across the network, FTP to send files across the network, and SMTP, Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, is used to send emails. All right, question number 4. How does an IPS differ from an IDS? IPS only detects potential threats while IDS takes actions to block them. IPS provides encryption while IDS does not. IPS operates at the network layer while the IDS operates at the application layer. IDS only detects potential threats while IPS blocks them. Now, best answer here, guys, is going to be, notice, D. Why is that correct? Well, let me stop right here. I want to stop right here. If there's one thing CompTIA does on their exam is acronym galore. Okay, know your acronyms. If you know the acronym of what IPS versus IDS, you'd have gotten this correct pretty much off the bat. I did a video right here on the channel where I gave away a free Network Plus guide. In the end of that guide, I explained every single one of those acronyms. So check that video out. It's absolutely free. There's nothing to sign up. I'm not going to take your email. You just click the link and download it. Now, let's get into why this is. So an IPS is an intrusion prevention system, and the IDS is the intrusion detection system. The IDS basically only detects a threat versus an IPS will actually block them. That is the main difference between them. Every other statement here is incorrect. IPS really doesn't do encryption. IPS, this is the opposite of D, so this is an incorrect statement. Now, they're not going to operate at different layers, so that is an incorrect statement. Remember something, here's what the IDS does. If there's a threat in the network, the IDS can detect it and send an alert to the administrator saying, hey, this machine has a potential worm on it. Versus an IPS, if it detects, oh my God, that machine over there has a worm, that machine has a virus, it can kill the internet connection and stop the machine from spreading that potential malware. Making D the best answer. Number 5, which protocol is commonly used to establish a secure VPN connection? Is it HTTP, FTP, IPsec, or SMTP? Once again, acronym galore here. You need to know your acronyms. You need to know your protocols. This is a very straightforward question if you understand what we use in securing VPN. Now, I actually covered this in the course. We actually do a lot of labs. I did a whole lab on this with you. Also, if you did the lab, it's a pretty easy thing because when you're setting up a secure VPN, you are going to use IPsec. Now, IPsec, which stands for the Internet Security Protocol, what this does is this is going to allow you to encrypt those VPN tunnels. HTTP is not a secure protocol, so you don't ever want to use HTTP, and it's not used really in VPNs. You could use HTTPS and do what's called SSL-based VPNs across basically an HTTPS connection, but that's not what that is. FTP is used to transfer file. We're not going to use that in a VPN, and SMTP is used to send emails. Has nothing to do with a VPN. IPsec is used in the L2TP or the layer 2 tunnel and protocol VPN tunnels and is one of the most popular options when doing a VPN. Number 6, how does NAT enhance network security? By assigning static IP addresses to devices, by encrypting all data packets, by hiding the internal IP address from external networks, by increasing network bandwidth. Now, if you know what NAT is, this is a very straightforward question. In fact, you're all probably using it right now. You're using NAT right now. You're probably at home or in an office and you have a private IP address. But when you go outside on the network, you have that external IP address. So what NAT, or Network Address Translation, what that's doing is that it's hiding the internal IP address. So people only see this external IP. That way, if a hacker ever tries to get into your network, they got to bypass your firewall and they just don't have a direct connection into your internal hosts. So this is basically the definition of what NAT is. It doesn't assign statics IP. Static IP are assigned by you. It doesn't encrypt data traffic. It just translates data. And it doesn't increase network bandwidth. In fact, it actually makes it more efficient. Number 7, which port is commonly used by SSH to secure communications? Let's stop right here. I want you guys to keep in mind that you need to know port numbers. You need to know your port numbers really well. In fact, in the CompTIA exam objectives, they give you a list of protocols in the exam objectives and they actually tell you the ports on them. So make sure you review your exam objectives. So the answer here is going to be C, 22. Okay, so 2021, these are FTP ports. You have Telnet on 23. So what is SSH? SSH is basically a secure version of Telnet. It's a secure version of logging into a device such as a router or such as a switch and configuring those devices. That's really what it's used. It basically used to do a secure command line access to a device. Used to configure routers, switches, and firewalls in particular. You don't ever want to use 23. This is Telnet. This is an insecure connection. And you probably don't want to use FTP also, just plain FTP, because that is insecure. For your exam, know your port numbers. Also, know when one protocol is insecure versus another. For example, know to use SSH and don't use Telnet. Use FTPS or SFTP. Don't use FTP. Things like that you need to know for your exam. Number 8, which of the following ports is used to secure web traffic? Once again, another port. 80, 23, 110, and 443. Okay, if you know your port numbers, pretty straightforward question. Right off the bat, 80 is the insecure version. All right, that's just plain HTTP. We just mentioned 23 as Telnet, so that's not secure. 110, I believe, is POP3. Don't hold me, is that IMAP or POP3? Any which way, that is insecure emails. 443 is actually what we're going to be using to do HTTPS, or Hypertext Transfer Protocol, the secure version of it. This encrypts it using things like TLS/SSL, basically the same thing. That secures your web page. In fact, if you're watching this on YouTube right now, you're already using port 443 to watch a secure web page. All right, make sure you know your protocol, your port numbers. We just discussed that. Number 9, and I can't emphasize this, we're going to talk a lot about this in a second. A company has been assigned a network address, 192.168.10.0/24. How many usable IP addresses are available for hosts on this network? Now, you will get questions. On this exam, I got questions on IP address. How many questions? I had about 3 questions on IP address, and I can't remember the questions exact, but you had to know the subnet. They're going to give you like a /25, a /26, a /27. They're going to give you an IP address, and you have to know what hosts are compatible. They may ask you the broadcast address in there. They may ask you the network ID in there. They may ask you how many hosts are available on a certain subnet. They may ask you how many networks you can get if you do that subnet. So I do recommend to make sure you know how to subnet. Now, I cover that in depth in the course. Make sure you know how to subnet. I showed you that trick of how to subnet out of your head. This doesn't require subnet. This is just using, if you know a /24 is a 255.255.255.0. This is just a plain Class C network. The question is, how many hosts do you get? Well, you're not going to get 255. You're not going to get 256, because even though a /24 basically gives you 256 hosts, the first one, .0, and .255 is unusable because one is the network ID, .0, and the .255 is the broadcast. So though with 0 and 255 gone, that means you can use IP address 192.168.10.1 to 192.168.10.254. That means you have usable 200, not 253, 255. There's no 255, it's only 254 usable addresses. If you don't know what I just spoke about there, go study your IP address, and you need to know. Check out the section in the course. It's like a good 3 or 4 hour section on IP address. As a network technician, network administrator, security person, every single device in your network will have an IP address. You need to make sure you know you need to know IP addressing really well. You cannot work in the world of IT if you don't know IP addressing. I believe that IP addressing is the most important section in the entire Network Plus curriculum. Number 10. Which of the following tools is most commonly used for analyzing and detecting network-based attacks? Is it Wireshark, PuTTY, firewalls, or IPSs? So I put in the actual application names, but I'm going to tell you what the exam may call it. So in this one, if you want to analyze, notice commonly used for analyzing and detecting network-based attacks. Now you want to detect it. So Wireshark is what's known as a protocol analyzer. This allows you to see and analyze network traffic. PuTTY is used, this is a software tool that we use to actually log into devices. This gives you like telnet and SSH connections. This doesn't use to analyze traffic. A firewall can block certain bad traffic, but it's not really used for analyzing the data. This is the key word. Even though a firewall and an intrusion prevention systems can detect and stop attacks, they're not really going to give you that traffic that you want to see. So the key word is going to be analyzing. What do we use to analyze network traffic? In the course, we do a lab with Wireshark. If you did the lab, pretty easy one, you'll be able to see the actual network traffic as it flows across the network. As a network administrator, this is a vital skill that all of you should have. So make sure you download. If you haven't done it yet, download. It's absolutely free. Download and make sure you understand how to use Wireshark. Number 11. Which of the following is not a DNS record type associated with email router or email security? Is it MX, SPF, SRV, or text, TXT? Make sure you understand all of the different DNS record types. Now, answer is the SRV, or what's known as a service record. Service records allow you to find specific servers on a network, such as what is the domain, what is the head DNS server, what is the domain controller on a network. MX records are basically where to find an email server, so that deals with email routing. SPF, or sender policy framework, this is how we secure emails, and the TXT records is associated with email. In fact, when you're setting up a lot of email security, they're actually TXT records. I had a question on the exam that dealt with this, where they ask you if you're setting up like an SPF record, what are you really setting up? And the answer is you're setting up a TXT record. So keep that in mind. When you see me cover DNS in the course, you'll see that in the lab portion, I show you all the different types in that DNS server. Number 12. Okay, this is a long one. A network technician is tasked with setting up a high-speed, long-distance link between two buildings that are more than 500 meters. The connection must maintain high data integrity and be immune to interference. What cable type would be the best choice? Is it multi-mode fiber, coaxial, single-mode fiber, or twisted pair cabling? Now, when it comes to network cable, notice that the question specifically says long distance, and it has to be immune to interference. So if we know it's long distance and it's immune, easy question. First of all, coax cable and twisted pair are not immune to interference, but fiber is. If you're using a short-run fiber, like inside of your LAN, it makes sense to go with a multi-mode fiber. They generate cheaper and easier to install. But when you need that longer run, you're going to have to go, especially between buildings across the city, you're going to have to go with a single-mode fiber. Single-mode fiber can span miles. So this here is your best option in this one. Notice, because remember, you want long distance, you want high speed, go with a single-mode fiber. Multi-mode fiber for your exam is when you use within a LAN. It gives you high speed, high immunity, cheap cheaper, I don't want to say too cheap, cheaper than a twisted pair cable. Twisted pair cabling is what we use 99% of the time in LAN. This connects workstations, gives you up to 100 meters of connection cable length, which is not too bad. It's not as good as fiber, but it's a lot cheaper. And coaxial, we really don't use coaxial in today's network. We may use them in video networking, those like to connect cameras and things like that. Or we use them in if you use cable TV. So really not used though in data networking. Number 13, here we go with a long one. A government agency requires a security model for its classified information system. The model must ensure strict access control based on the sensitivity of the information and the user clearance. Only users with the appropriate security clearance should be able to access certain data, regardless of their role or position. What access control model is most appropriate for this scenario? Now you have to review, this is going to come in the security section of the course. Make sure you understand the different security models that are out there. Now, the first one up that we have is going to be DAC, or discretionary access control. This is when you give the user access and basically the user admins on the machine. So this is not what they're talking about. Mandatory access control is, of course, the answer. Mandatory access control is used in basically like places like the NSA. You access data based on a clearance level. You access data based on what the system is going to set you at. You have role-based access control and attribute-based access control. Role-based access control is when you access data based on a role. Maybe if you're in an accounting group, or you're in the finance group, you can only access accounting or finance data. So that's not what they're talking about here. Attribute-based is when you can access data based on a specific attribute, such as maybe a time of day or an IP address location. This thing here is not asking that. They're talking about specifically based on the user's clearance, which is going to be mandatory access control. And this is really only used by government agencies, especially high secure government agencies. Think NSA and DoD here. Number 14, which of the following allows a single public IP address to represent multiple private IP addresses by tracking traffic using different port numbers? Is it dynamic DNS, VPN, subnetting, or port address translation? Now, I could have made this harder, and I thought about doing that to you, but I wanted to show you guys something. If you read the question, it basically gives you the answer, right? It says in it port numbers. Now, on the exam, they're probably not going to use the word port address translation. They're probably going to just say PAT. And you have to know what that means. So once again, now I did this on purpose. I had PAT and then I just spelled it out to let you guys know that you need to know your acronyms. If there's one thing you get out of this video, is you better know every single one of those acronyms listed in the exam objectives. Okay, so what exactly is it? So when you're using, and port address translation is a form in NAT. So when you're using NAT, you have a single public IP address. And then how do we allow that single public IP address to track all of the internal? So for example, you may have one single public address, but you have 50 internal devices. The way it's doing that, it's actually not translating an IP address because there's only one of the public. It's translating a port number that assigns different and dynamic ports to each one of the traffic requests. That's why it's called port address translation. This is a form of NAT, all right? So when you look at NAT, there's static NAT, there's dynamic NAT, and then there's overloaded NAT, which is also known as port address translation. Dynamic DNS is basically changing an IP address based on a domain name dynamically. Dynamic DNS allows you to have a domain name that maps to an ever-evolving change in IP or dynamic address. VPN allows us to connect across the network or across unsecure networks like the internet. So basically a user can connect to an office. And subnetting allows us to divide large networks using IP addresses. Number 15. Which of the following is a distant vector routing protocol using smaller networks routing data between routers? Is it FTP, STP, OSPF, or RIP, or RIP? Now, answer here, pretty easy one if you understand your routing protocols. The Route Information Protocol is a very famous protocol that we use in today's world. If you have a small network, in which case you just want to route across a few networks. It is limited by the number of hops, 16 hops in particular. So you're not going to use this on a large network. FTP is used to transfer files. This has nothing to do with IP routing. STP, or the span tree protocol, this is used to ensure that when you're building a multi-layer switched network, that you ensure that you don't have any kind of repeated links that would create routing loops in your network or switching loops in your network. So this has to deal with switching, not routing. OSPF. Okay, when you're talking about routing protocols, you have link state and you have distant vector. Distant vector is based on hops. Link state really looks at the speed of the links. OSPF is the most popular of all of those link state protocols. RIP is one of the most popular distant vector protocols. All right, make sure you know your different routing protocols. If you do the course with me, you know we did a whole lab. I showed you guys how to set up packet tracer. We did all the labs in the course when I showed you guys how to configure the actual Cisco routers for OSPF and route information protocol. We also did labs and I showed you guys about span and tree also. Number 16, easy question on this. What physical tool should a technician use to verify the integrity of an Ethernet cable? Is it cable crimper, multimeter, cable tester, or wire stripper? So when you want to check, basically, does a cable work, you're going to have to make sure you use a cable tester. So cable testers is where we're going to connect. They have two ends on them. And basically, I connect the cable to see if the cable actually works. A crimper is how you put the head on the cable, like you put the RJ45 connector on the twisted pair cable. A multimeter is used to test the voltage on the cable, and wire stripper just takes the jacket off of the cable. When I made the cable in the course, wasn't the best cable making there, but I did use the crimper to put the head on. I used the wire stripper to take the jacket off. I didn't use the multimeter, but we did use, as you saw in the demonstration, the cable tester to verify it works. Number 17, which of the following devices acts as a multi-port network appliance that operates primarily at layer 2 of the OSI model, using a MAC address table to forward traffic based on hardware addresses, thereby segmenting collisions domain within a broadcast domain? Is it a switch, hub, access point, or a router? Now, if you understand your OSI model, which you will get questions on, make sure you study that. This is a pretty easy one because there's really only one device here that's going to work at layer 2. If you guys remember what layer 2 is, so you have layer 1, 2. Remember, it's numbered from the bottom. So you have your physical, your data link, your network layer, layer 1, 2, 3. So the switch operates at layer 2. The switch passes data based on the hardware address, or also known as your MAC address. It does have a MAC address table. Make sure you understand that. A hub basically operates at layer 1. This is more of a multi-port repeater. So the access point is not going to pass data based on a MAC address, and a router is a layer 3 device that passes data based on an IP address or a logical address. Number 18. Now, let me stop right here. This is a question that's based on the CompTIA's troubleshooting methodology. In the last objectives, you have to memorize the steps listed there. You will get questions. I got about 2 or 3 questions that are very similarly worded to this. A network technician has received reports of slow network performance from several users on the same subnet. The technician confirms that the issue is consistent across multiple devices and that other subnets are ineffective. According to the methodology, what should the technician do next? Now let's stop right here. Notice he received reports from several users. They confirmed that the issue is consistent, so he did something. The technician is confirming that the issue is consistent across multiple, so he did something. So he's confirming, okay, this is across multiple devices. What should he do? Should he escalate this? Should he escalate it? The issue to senior network, test and implement a potential solution, establish a theory of probable cause, document the finding. Now, notice he already knows, and he basically is localizing the problem. The next thing the technician has to do is he has to come up with, okay, what is causing this? Before the technician can escalate it, He needs to know what's causing this, because if it's something that he can fix, he can just fix it right there. If it's something outside of of his ability to fix things, then he may escalate it. He can't test and implement a solution until he finds out what's causing this, and he can't document anything and define it until the whole problem has been solved. So C here is the best answer. These types of questions, in my opinion, are pretty easy. All you have to do is make sure you understand those steps that CompTIA gives you, and they're very particular to CompTIA. Make sure you understand those steps, and you're going to get at least 3 of these questions correct. Number 19, another big one. After an investigation, an IT department discovers that many employees are accessing social media and streaming websites during work hours. The company wants to ensure employees can only access work-related during work hours. What should they do next? Configure firewalls to block specific ports used by these websites. Deploy a web proxy server with content filtering to restrict access to non-work websites. Enable port mirroring to monitor employees' traffic. Set up login on the router to capture all. Now, notice, the question specifically says that the company wants to ensure that employees can only access work-related. So in this particular question, there's a couple of things you can eliminate. If you do a login, this is not going to stop them from accessing the website. If you just log things, it'll show who accessed what. Now, so is C. This is to monitor. We don't want to monitor them. We want to stop them from accessing it. Now, that brings me to 2 things. Now, websites all come through the same port, right? It's not like websites are going to come through different ports, different websites, different ports. That's not the way it works. So we know right off the bat A is wrong. Proxy servers is how we used to control internet connection. If you're at a university or you're going to school or you're working in a big company and you go to that company or school's computer and you try to access Facebook or some other websites, and you get that big thing that comes across the screen that says, this website is not allowed on campus computers or something, that's a proxy server. Proxy servers allows us to filter web content. In fact, I can go into the proxy and say, you can only access these sites. Or I can go into it and it says, I'm going to block you from these sites. I did a small lab with this in the course, so you can check that out also. Number 20, what is the golden configuration in the context of network management? Is it A, a configuration that allows a maximum throughput on network devices? A temporary configuration applied during scheduled maintenance? C, a dynamic configuration that automatically adjusts based on network traffic patterns? D, a baseline configuration that is saved and used to restore a device to a known stable state? Okay, this here is a straight definition question. You just need to understand what exactly is a golden configuration. So when a company says we have a golden configuration, means they have a best, the top configuration of a machine. All machines should be in this quote-unquote golden configuration. So it's really a baseline. It's like a saved baseline. Minimum, it's like these minimum set of configs, like, for example, certain group policies, certain updates. For example, blocking out control panel on a machine. Join to a specific domain, set an IP certain way. That way, if the machine ever dies or the machine needs to be restored, restore this to this golden configuration. Now, it doesn't allow for maximum throughput of network devices because it's not just for network devices. It's not a temporary configuration. It's not dynamic. It doesn't change based on traffic patterns. It is the same one. Question 21. Which of the following is a link state routing protocol? RIP, OSPF, BGP, and EIGRP. Now, the first thing up I want to mention is when I took this exam, I had a lot of questions on routing protocols. It kind of felt like I was taking more like a CCNA exam. Any which way, the answer here, when it comes to link state protocol, one of the most famous one is going to be open shortest path first. Now, the open shortest path first is basically a protocol that routes data basically on how fast the link is, or the link metrics. RIP, route information protocol, border gateway protocol, and exterior-interior gateway routing protocol with Cisco proprietary. That's a hybrid. Border gateway is a distant vector, and RIP is also a distant vector protocols, making OSPF the best answer. Question 22. Which routing protocol is a path vector protocol primarily used for inter-domain routing? Now, what protocol powers up the internet? It basically uses autonomous systems. Is it OSPF, BGP, RIP, or EIGRP? Now, right off the bat, the moment you saw it says routing on the internet, this should have given away the answer. The only real protocol we use on the internet to route across massive networks or big autonomous systems is going to be the Border Gateway Protocol. This, when you're studying your Cisco certifications higher up in Cisco, this is the one that you're going to be using, Border Gateway Protocol. OSPF, or Open Shortest Path First, is used in inside networks. RIP and EIGRP are basically protocols we use inside of our networks, not outside of our networks. 23. A company is concerned that employees might accidentally or intentionally send sensitive financial data outside the organization via email. Which of the following would be the most effective method to prevent this type of keyword data leakage? Implement a DLP to detect and block sensitive data, encrypt all outbound emails, install an endpoint protection software on all devices, enforcing strict password policies for accessing emails. Now, if you know the acronym of DLP, this should give it away. In most big organizations today, we implement DLP. What DLP does is that if it's installed in the network, if somebody tries to email like credit card information or social security or healthcare information, the DLP would prompt them and could potentially stop them. So this is something that organizations want to implement in order to stop people sending out sensitive information. If you encrypt emails, it wouldn't stop people. If you have an encryption on it, it wouldn't stop people from sending data. Although if anybody sniffs the line, they wouldn't see it. So it wouldn't stop them from sending it out. Endpoint protection software detects malware on your computer. It wouldn't stop people from sending anything out. It would probably stop malware from infecting the machine, though. Strict password policies really has nothing to do with email, things being sent out through emails. 24. A network administrator is upgrading the wireless network in an office building to support faster speeds and better performance in a keyword crowded environment with multiple devices connected simultaneously. The office building also has a mixture of newer and older devices that needs to be connected. Which 802 standard would be best choice? We have A, AC, G, and B. Now, I thought this question was fairly easy, as I made it fairly easy, because if you know you have a lot of wireless networks, you're going to want to go with a newer standard. The newest standard here is AC. Now, wireless AC is a much better one than wireless A, B, and G. First of all, it supports different, the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz spectrum. So you probably want to go with that 5 gigahertz spectrum because then you're not utilizing the 2.4, which is generally a crowded spectrum. The other thing here is that AC supports a lot faster speeds than the A, G, and B. 25. A company's IT department notices that multiple users are being redirected to malicious websites, even when entering legitimate URLs into their browsers. Which of the following is most likely the cause of the issue? DNS cache poisoning, man in the middle, ARP spoofing, or DHCP starvation? Now, what gives away the answer in this particular question is it says when entering legitimate URLs. If you're putting in like google.com and it's redirecting you to a bad website, that means there's something going on with your DNS server. That means your DNS is resolving google.com to a bad malicious IP address, which is pointing you to that bad server. So, more than likely, the DNS cache, everybody's machine, everybody's computer has a cache. Every website you go to, it caches what domains you've been to and what IP it resolved to. If you want to see it, you just go to your command prompt on Windows. You type ipconfig /flush DNS. I'm sorry, /display DNS, and that'll show you the DNS cache. If you want to get rid of it, you just say /flush DNS. Now, what hackers do is they poison that cache. What they do is they insert false entries. So let's say you've been to google.com. What they do, let's say google.com points to 1.1.1.1. What they do is they change it to 2.2.2.2. So every time you go to google.com, you get 2.2.2, which is this bad website or bad server. Man-in-the-middle attack is more like a sniffing attack. What this does is it sniffs the data, not changes the data. ARP spoofing this is when they change the IP address that's mapped to the actual MAC address. This wouldn't affect DNS. DHCP starvation, what this is going to do is going to deplete all the addresses from the DHCP server. And that way no one can get a DHCP address. Number 26, a network administrator is configuring EIGRP on several routers to ensure quick failover in case the primary route becomes unavailable. Which of the following term refers to the backup route that EIGRP uses? So in EIGRP, you could have multiple redundant paths, and that's one of the greatest things when using EIGRP is that if there's multiple paths, it creates redundant paths. The one that it always uses is known as the primary path to the primary route, and the other one is called the feasible successor. In other words, if this main route doesn't work or this main path doesn't work, it'll take this secondary option. So that is the correct terminology. The others are not the correct terminology, as feasible successor is the correct one. 27. A guest contractor needs temporary access to an organization network for a few days to complete a project. The organization wants to ensure that the contractor access is secured and limited to only necessary resources during this period. Which of the following authentication method would be best suitable? A, using a permanent employee's credential with two-factor authentication. Okay. Implement MAC address filtering to allow the contractor's device. Okay. Assigning a unique temporary user account with an expiration date. Okay. Setting up an open guest Wi-Fi network with a shared password. All right, let's see what you guys got on this one. I thought this one here was pretty straightforward. The question specifically states, you notice, it's for a few days. So it's something that's temporary. They want to ensure is the account is secure and limited to only necessary resources. So you want to create an account and you want to say this account can only access this resource with this time. So if we make a temporary user account and put an expiration date on it, now we can assign the right resources to that account. You don't want to get something that's permanent because it says a few days. There is nothing here. MAC address filtering applies to devices, not user accounts. And a Wi-Fi network is going to allow all kinds of devices, not a particular user account. 28. How are you guys doing so far? You guys doing okay? Are you guys getting these questions? I hope so. A network technician is troubleshooting a slow file transfer issue between two devices on the same network. The technician suspects that the problem may be related to how the data is being segmented. Which layer of the OSI model is responsible for data segmentation? Now, in the course, if you look at your OSI model, there's a diagram I give you and I tell you things like datagrams. Which one of those says segment? Well, the layer that segments data or breaks data into segments is called the transport layer. So here you have the physical layer. This is going to be things like bits. The network layer are packets, data link layer are frames, and the transport layer are segments. Remember to go over that in the OSI model, in the diagrams in the course. That's covered under the topic of encapsulation and de-encapsulation. Make sure you know those really well. Question 29. Cloud service provider hosts applications from multiple clients on the same physical infrastructure. Each client's data and configuration are isolated, but they all share the same underlying hardware resources. Which term best describes this type of environment? Is it multi-tenancy, virtualization, single tenancy, or containerization? Now, I kind of gave it away when I put single and multi-tenancy in there because the answer is multi-tenancy. One of the greatest things about cloud, the way the cloud works, is that it's basically a giant shared infrastructure. Multi-tenancy means that they have tons of hardware and they have tons and tons of users utilizing all of those hardware. So let's say AWS, Amazon Web Services, the biggest cloud provider in the world right now. Let's say let's just say their whole network was 100 machines. They're basically going to allow 1,000 people to use all 100 machines at the same time. This is called multi-tenancy. In other words, multiple quote-unquote tenants are utilizing the same physical resources. So this way, One guy, they don't have to have one server just used by one guy, and the guy may not use up all of the server resources, wasting resources. Multi-tenancy is great in cloud because it reduces costs and optimizes resource usage. The whole thing is called virtualization. No cloud structure is a single tenancy unless that cloud is like a private cloud. But public clouds are almost always multi-tenancy. Containers. Containers is a way basically to have smaller virtual machines. They're not talking about that. They're talking about multiple people utilizing cloud resources. Question 30. A network administrator is comparing different routing protocols for an enterprise network. The administrator wants to choose a protocol that minimizes bandwidth usage between send and updates only when there are changes in the network topology, rather than periodically broadcast an entire table. Which of the following protocol would be the best choice? Now, routing protocols. The way routing protocol work is that they have to keep updating themselves. If there's a change, let's say somebody adds a link to the network, or the protocol finds out of a new path that's become available, they have to talk and update each other. The question is, how are they doing that? Well, in this question, they want to know which one here is, they want a protocol to minimize the bandwidth, so we don't want to push it out all the time. And you want something that pushes only when changes are made. The best protocol that does that is EIGRP, which is heavily optimized. Uses things like multicast, and it only is going to push things when something changes. This is different than something called RIP, Route Information Protocol, version 1, which uses a broadcast. It basically sends it to every device in the network every time there's like a routing change. So you never want to use that. POP has nothing to do with routing protocols. That's post office protocol. That's receiving emails. NTP has nothing to do with routing protocols. This is network time protocol. This is how we synchronize clocks across our networks. Guys, if you appreciate this video and what we have done here and all these questions and me standing here for so long, I would greatly appreciate if you give the video a like, subscribe to the channel. 31. A data center is expanding and the IT team needs to choose the appropriate rack size for new server deployments. Which of the following factors should the team consider when selecting a rack size? Choose all that apply. A, number of servers and devices to be housed. Okay. Cooling and airflow requirements. Sure. Rack color and aesthetics. Future expansion. Okay. Power consumption. Okay. Rack placement in relation to other devices. Choose all that applies. Now, I put on this one, choose all that apply. I want to point out something. On the exam, they make it easier, because what they do is they're actually going to say choose 3 or choose 4 or choose 2, which makes it a lot easier than just choose all. Give you a quick story. I once took an exam and they said choose all. I literally chose all. I did pass that test. I'm not sure if I got that one right, but they're not going to do this. They're always going to say choose 2, choose 3. So when you're selecting a rack, let's say you got a giant rack, and you're looking at the rack and you're saying, well, which rack should I put into my organization? Well, the number one thing you're going to ask yourself is, how much devices am I going to put? How am I going to keep it cool? If I buy a rack now, can I add to it later? And how do I push power through it? I don't think you're really going to care too much about what the rack color is. Almost all of them are black any which way. Placement in relation to other devices. Although I do like this answer, racks are generally placed in dedicated locations, making A, B, D, and E the best answers. Question 32. A remote employee needs to securely access the company's internal resources while working from home. The IT department is deciding between a split tunnel or full tunnel VPN for the employee. What is the key benefit of using a full tunnel VPN? Full tunnel reduces bandwidth usage for the company's internal network. Increases security by routing all traffic through the company's secure network. Faster connection speeds for accessing external, allowing the employee to access both local and company resources at the same time or simultaneously. Best answer here, guys, is going to be B. Here's why. So understand the difference between full tunnel and split tunnel. So when you work at home, a lot of people do today, if you're connected to your company's network, utilizing a split tunnel. A split tunnel means that only when you access company resource, you go through the VPN. And when you want to access like an internet site on your local computer, then you just utilize your own internet connection. That's a split tunnel. A full tunnel, every single thing you do goes through the VPN. So if you're accessing a personal website on your machine, you're checking your personal email, maybe you're doing some instant messaging on your machine or something, all of that goes through, not just what you're accessing from the company, but what you're accessing personally. So what this does is that it increases security, because now every single thing you do on that machine flows through the company's network. So if there's any kind of malware or bad sites that you may be visiting, or sites that contains malware, all that's going to be inspected by the company's traffic. It doesn't actually reduce the bandwidth. Full tunnel actually pushes more bandwidth through the VPN. It actually slows it down, because now everything is going through the full tunnel connection. And because of that, you're not just going to your ISP, you got to go to your company to get to the ISP and all kinds of stuff. It slows it down, actually. Both of them allows you to access. You can do local and external resources at the same time. 33. Now this one here, I have to jump down to the bottom of the screen here. Let's see what's going on here. I do want to point out before we do this question that you are going to get questions. We're going to give you small diagrams or screenshots, and you're going to have to read like a table or something. In the course, we do a whole bunch of commands. You have to read the output of the commands. This is an output of like a show command from a switch. All right, a network engineer is reviewing the MAC address table to resolve a network issue. Pause the video right now, and I want you to review the table in depth. Answer A. The IP address 192.168 is assigned to two different MAC addresses on the same VLAN. The MAC address is associated with incorrect, gives you the MAC address, incorrect VLAN. The IP address 192.168.152.54 is assigned to VLAN 21. The MAC address, and then it gives it to you, is assigned to two different interfaces. Now, which one is the best answer? So hopefully you really analyze it, and I thought this one here was pretty easy. You notice that the IP address 1.21 is, it has two different, if you notice, MAC address, and it's assigned to two different interfaces. Can somebody tell me what's going on here? More than likely, this is an IP conflict. That means that Ethernet, that port 3 and port 6 that's connected to the switch, has two different machines. How do I know they're two different machines? Because they have two different MAC addresses. And what you're seeing here is that it looks like an IP conflict. Like somebody assigned this IP on this machine, assigned the same IP on another machine. So they're connected on two different ports. It doesn't matter if they're on the same VLAN on there. So that's why this answer here is the best. Now, why are the rest wrong? Is associated, you can't determine if this is right or wrong. You just can't look at a table and tell. There is associated with VLAN, but you can't determine that. The question doesn't say if what belongs in what VLAN. Is assigned to two different interfaces? It's not. If you look, it's just one. Now, once again, you will get questions on the exam that deals with outputs of commands. So make sure you know them well. 34. Which of the following is the next step to take after implementing a solution to a network problem? So, if you have a network issue, maybe you have a computer that's not accessing a network, and you found out, okay, maybe it's a gateway problem, maybe it's an IP problem, and you fix the IP, what do you do next? Well, verify full system functionality, escalate it, identify new problems related to the network, retest the original theory of probable cause. So if you come up with a solution, the easiest thing here to do is to verify that it works. Pretty straightforward. Now, why I added this question is because in your exam objective, I mentioned this earlier, in the exam objectives, in the last objectives, 4 or 5, you have the CompTIA troubleshooting steps. Make sure you know those steps. And in one, when they say implement, the next one is to verify functionality. So you have to follow that in the steps in the order that they give you. You're not going to escalate it unless it fails. Don't identify new problems until you verify everything works. There's no need to retest the original theory. That's not actually a step. 35. A network engineer notices that a switch has begun flooding traffic to all ports due to an overload of fake addresses in its CAM table. What type of attack is likely responsible for this behavior? Is it ARP spoofing, MAC flooding, DNS spoofing, or man-in-the-middle attack? Answer here is going to be a flood. Now, I thought this one here was pretty easy. Notice it says it's an overload of fake addresses. This is going to tell you right away it's dealing with some kind of flood. Why do people do this? Let's get something straight. When you're connected to a switch, when you send data to one port, it doesn't repeat that data on every single port. It sends it directly over to the correct port. In fact, I have a switch right here. So I was teaching a course earlier using this particular switch. So here I have a PoE switch. And when data comes in here, if this data coming into port 1 is destined to port 4, it goes right in here and it comes right out of port 4. It doesn't flood into every port. It does this by utilizing, in this box, we have a CAM table, or what's known as a content addressable table, or content addressable memory, CAM. So that table says that this computer is on this port and this computer is on this port. What people do is they flood the CAM table. So let's say the CAM table takes 1,000 entries. They push 1,000 fake entries. Then all of a sudden, this switch becomes a hub. And any data that comes into port 1 is then repeated to every single port. This turns your switches into hubs. Hackers do this, or I should say bad people do this, because what they want is they want to grab all the data on the network. If all your switches become hubs, then anybody can sniff all the traffic on your network. So they would do a MAC flooding to flood the CAM tables. Now, this is not a spoofing attack. A spoofing attack basically replaces one for another. So instead of you think you're talking to one person, you might be getting to another person. It doesn't flood any traffic. So it's not a spoofing attack. A man in the middle sits between connections to sniffs data. It doesn't flood anything. 36. A company is looking to optimize its storage network to handle large amounts of data more efficiently. They want to reduce overhead and improve the speed of data transmission. Which of the following technologies would be the most efficient for achieving this goal? Now, the first thing we want to mention is they're talking of what's called a storage network. Now, a storage network, also known as STANs, storage area networks. These kinds of networks are basically where we're going to store large volumes of data. The technology it uses to move this data around between all the workstations and all the servers connected to the SAN box, or the SAN, storage area network, is going to be the fiber channel. The fiber channel technology is what allows that. iSCSI is how the drives are connected, so we're not talking about the drive connections. Network file system, this is how we share files across the network, and SMB is also about sharing files across the network. And this one we're talking about storage area networks in particular. Number 37. Which XML-based security standard allows sensitive user information to be exchanged between systems for authentication and authorization purposes? Now, you have to know things like SAML, OAuth for your exam. You will see questions on that. And as you go up in your security career, you're going to see that a lot. In fact, we use things like SAML and OAuth a lot throughout the internet. The answer here is going to be SAML. Now, where do you use this? If you guys ever go to a website and it's things like, hey, use your Gmail to log into this account, log into this website, so you have to make another account. That means there's a technology that allows you to transfer your authentication information and what you can access between services like Facebook, Gmail, LinkedIn, and between other variety of websites that you can then connect to. This type of technology in particularly is called SSO for the web, or what's called federated services. And one of the most famous one that does utilize an XML-based standard is SAML. Now, SAML stands for the Security Assertion Markup Language. And this is how we're going to share authentication and authorization. So authentication allows you to log in. Authorization allows you to access resources. OAuth, or open authorization, is only for authorization. It's not going to share the authentication. Radius is a protocol we use to centralize authentication information. And Kerberos, we use this more in internal networks, such as when you're using an Active Directory network in a large company to authenticate people or to create that SSO. Question 38. A network engineer has assigned the IP address 10.16.54.18 with a subnet mask 255.255.252 to the router. What is the purpose of this IP configuration? It is designed for a network with more than 200. It is used to assign multiple IP addresses. It is configured for point-to-point link with another router. It is reserved for users to broadcast. Now, right off the bat, I can tell you, this is a pretty easy question. Because if you guys know your subnetting, this gets right to the point. Because a .252 only gives you 2 usable IP addresses. Remember that .254 is only 2 IP addresses, one broadcast, one network, so it's unusable. So a .252 gives you 2 usable IP addresses. This is a /30, and we use this when we're connecting 2 points, like 2 routers. It doesn't have 200 IP address. It really only has 2, so it's not going to say multiple, and it's not just used for a server, and it's not a reserve. All right. 39, another IP question. A security administrator has created a new firewall object for a device with the IP address 10.20.30.40/26. However, the firewall software only allows the subnet mask to be entered in dotted decimal. Which of the following is the correct subnet mask to use? So you guys have to know, if I say /26/27/28, what are those IP? So if I say a slash, by default, a class C is a /24, but what's a /25? Then what's a class /26? So we have /25, 26, 27, 28. So 128, 192, 224, 240, 248, 252, 254, 255. If you guys remember that, if you took the course with me, I told you guys to memorize that set of subnet masks, and that's a 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. If you guys remember that, subnetting is quite easy on there. Number 40, a network administrator is unable to remotely access a network appliance that has failed to start up correctly. The appliance is not responding to standard management interfaces like SSH or web-based. Which of the following method would most likely allow the administrator to access the appliance for troubleshooting? Restarting the appliance remotely using a wake on LAN, using a VPN, connecting to a radius authentication, establishing a console connection using a serial cable. Now, right off the bat, you got to do some troubleshooting in this question. It tells you that they can't access anything utilizing SSH or web. That means the thing is not remotely accessible. So that's going to eliminate almost all the options except for one. For wake on LAN to work, it has to be remotely accessible. For a VPN to work, it has to be remotely accessible. A radius server is just to authenticate to it. What you need to do, if you can't get to a device remotely, you need to physically go to that device and you need to connect to the device manually. And you can use a roll cable or the roll cables which connects to like a serial port on a machine to connect to it. So that's important, making that the best answer. 41. An organization has a limited number of public IP addresses, but needs all employees to access the internet simultaneously from the internal network. Which of the following technology would best allow multiple devices to share a single public? Deploy a DHCP server to assign IP addresses dynamically. Utilize PAT. Implementing a VPN tunnel. Configuring a proxy server for internet access. In today's world, we're all using something called PAT, Port Address Translation. This is a form of NAT where you use a single IP address to map to multiple internal IP addresses. How do they do this? Well, it's not translating the IP because it's only one IP. They're translating multiple ports. A DHCP server, it has to be configured with the IPs. And it's only going to give the IPs internally, not external IPs. Implementing a VPN doesn't allow you to take one public and have multiple private. A proxy server, this just goes out on internet on behalf of it. It has nothing to do with mapping public and private IP address. 42. A network administrator is reviewing signal coverage in a large building to ensure optimal Wi-Fi performance. To identify areas with weak signals and adjust the access point placement accordingly. Which of the following tools should the administrator use? So this is a big problem in networking where when you're setting up access points, sometimes you may have like dead spots. Sometimes you may have where the signal is very strong and then the signal is too weak over here. You have to know where to place your access point. But which one of these tools is going to tell us where we have hot and cold signals, where the signal is very strong, where the signal isn't, where the signal is red hot or really cold and blue? Well, as you can imagine, the answer here is going to be a heat map. So heat map, note for your exam, tells us how strong a signal is. This is used in wireless placement. Packet sniffer bandwidth monitor is going to look at the packets around the network, not a Wi-Fi signal. syslog is used to grab log files on servers, has nothing to do with wireless. 43, a security administrator needs to monitor the contents of data transmitted between a secure network segment and the rest of the company's internal network to ensure no sensitive information is being leaked. Which of the following tools would best meet this requirement? Port mirroring, DLP, SNMP traps, or FTP server. So notice, is monitor the contents of data transmitted between secure network segments. So that's number one. He wants to ensure that there's no sensitive information that's being leaked. So which is the best option here? Remember, he's monitoring the contents of the traffic. If you have a switch network and you're monitoring the contents of the traffic, you want to make sure that you know, hey, you know what? Nobody's sending a social security number. Nobody is sending financial information. Nobody's sending healthcare information. Nobody's sending a credit card data. And the best way to do that is to implement a DLP system. A DLP system can look at the data leaving and coming into machines to make sure there's secure information. Port mirroring. This port mirroring just allows you to take data from the switch and send it all to one port. SNMP allows you to manage network devices, and FTP is used to send files. Question 44. The network administrator needs to implement a monitoring solutions that tracks the health and performance of devices across the network, including bandwidth usage, uptime, and potential hardware failure. Which of the following solutions would best meet this? syslog, DHCP server, port mirroring, or SNMP? Best answer here, notice you're tracking the device health, quote unquote, performance of the device. That means you're managing the device. If you know what this acronym means, it means Simple Network Management Protocol. Basically, the administrator is managing the device. syslog is used to grab the log files or centralize the log files from the devices. So that's not that. The DHCP server is used to give out IP addresses. Port mirroring allows you to take all the traffic on one switch and send it to one particular port. And this here allows us to monitor the quote-unquote health of the device. Question 45. A network engineer is tasked with connecting two ports from an access switch to the core switch for redundancy and increased bandwidth. Which of the following technologies should the engineer use to ensure both links can be used simultaneously without creating a loop? Is it port spanning, port mirroring, LACP, or VTP? Now, here's what they're talking about here. So let's say you have a core switch. This is where the backbone is. This is where all your servers might connect to, your main routers and so on. And then you have an access switch. This is where all your workstations would connect to. To create redundancy, the question was, what if we connect two ports like this? The problem when you do this is you create a switching loop. So you would have to enable things like STP to prevent the switching loop. The problem with a protocol like STP or span tree protocol is that it monitors for this and then it shuts one link off. That's not what this question wants. Notice it says can be used simultaneously without creating a loop. The best answer here, if you know the acronym, Link Aggregation Control Protocol, would have given it away. The best answer here is going to be to use this protocol because this does exactly what this question wants, which is to combine the links so you could utilize both links. Remember, STP prevents switching loops. The problem with STP is that it's going to shut one of the links off. You want to use both links and you want to be able to, use both links and you want to be able to send data across both of them, not just one of them. Port spanning and port mirroring is actually the same thing. If you ever have two questions, if you have a question where choices are exactly the same, it's not the answer because they're exactly, port spanner is also known as port mirroring, where you take all the traffic from the switch and sends it across one port. The virtual trunking protocol, or VTP, used to pass VLAN information across multiple links. 46. An organization is reviewing its disaster recovery plan and wants to ensure it can restore operations quickly after an outage. The recovery team is particularly focused on how much data can be lost and how quickly systems can be brought back online. Which of the following metrics would best help the team evaluate these factors? Is it RPO and RTO, MTTF, MTTR, SLA? Now, this is going to deal in the domain of disaster recovery. You have to know these terms for your exam because that's the answer. Recovery time objective, recovery point objectives. Recovery time objectives, hey, how fast, what is the max amount of time we can go down versus, and the other one is how much data we're willing to lose. So make sure you understand these terms. Maximum time to failure. This is how long something will take to fail, so it's not that. Time to repair, MTTR. They're not talking how to repair a device. And SLA is a service level agreement. This is going to tell us minimum time, I should say. The SLA is basically going to tell us how much uptime we'll have like on a service contract. This deals with vendors more than anything else. But remember, for your exam, make sure you know that the RPO is the maximum amount of data loss, and the RTO defines the maximum amount of time to restore after disaster. 47. A network administrator is configuring a VPN for remote employees and wants to reduce the load of the company's VPN server while improving internet browsing speeds for users. Which VPN configuration would best achieve this? Split, full tunnel VPN, VPN with IPsec, or site-to-site. I went over this earlier. When you do a full tunnel VPN, every single thing the user does on the user's personal machine goes through the VPN tunnel. That's not what they want. They want to minimize the use of it for just company resources. So in that way, use a split VPN. That way, only company requests or company resources goes through the VPN. Everything else just uses the user's local internet connection. Full tunnel we just explained. VPN with IPsec, almost all VPN should be using IPsec as good security. Site-to-site VPN is only when you connect two different sites, like maybe a New York site to an LA site. It's really not for employees to work from home. 48. A network engineer connects a network appliance to a free port on a switch. The appliance does not require any special VLAN or trunking. Which of the configuration would be most appropriate for the switch port to connect? Is it an enabled port mirroring? Configure the port as a trunk port. Configure as an access port. Disable port security. Now, what you want to do is you want to first ask yourself, well, what kind of device is this? If it's just a normal device, like you're connecting a workstation to a switch, you want to make sure that you put that thing in access mode, right? It becomes an access port. Trunk ports is how you connect other switches to pass VLAN information. A mirror port is when you connect things like protocol analyzer like Wireshark to grab all the network data. So these don't work. Never disable the port for security reasons. If you disable the port, then the device can't connect. Right, so you don't want that. All right, 49, getting halfway there, guys, really close. A network administrator needs to ensure that traffic is distributed across multiple servers in a data center based on the quantity of traffic each server is handling to prevent overload. Which of the following technologies would best meet this? VLAN, port mirroring, trunking, or load balancer? Well, I thought this question was pretty easy. I found this one hard to word. Not to give away the answer in the question, notice it says you want to basically distribute traffic across multiple servers, so you are balancing the load across multiple servers. VLAN is how we will break up network segments for security. Port mirroring we went over already. And trunking is how we get multiple VLAN information across switches. So load balancer, best option. Question 50. A network administrator receives reports that multiple users are experiencing slow network speeds. The administrator starts by collecting data from affected users and reviewing systems log. Which step of the troubleshooting methodology is the administrator currently performing? So let's stop right here. The administrator is receiving reports that they're experiencing some slow connectivity. He basically starts by collecting data and reviewing the system log. What is he doing? Implementing a solution, establishing a theory of probable cause, identifying the problem, or testing the theory. This one here is, once again, is part of those CompTIA troubleshooting steps. I thought this was pretty easy. If you read it, I think it was pretty easy. I didn't think anybody was going to get this one wrong, because he's not implementing a solution here. He's just gathering the data. He's not establishing the theory of probable cause yet, because he's still trying to figure out what's going on in this network. And he's not testing a theory. Testing a theory means that you're going to test something or see, okay, maybe this is really what's causing it. He's just gathering data at this point, making that the best answer. Before we get on to 51, are you guys enjoying this video? If you are, once again, can you please click on the like button, click on subscribe. I put a lot of work into this. It takes a lot of takes sometimes to get these questions correct. Greatly appreciated. If you do enjoy the way I'm presenting this course and you think you're learning a lot, check out my entire Network Plus class, links below. And also have a great practice question. If you've already studied for Network Plus and you just want to practice and you're enjoying these questions and my explanation, check out the link below for my practice question course also. Let's get back to the video. Okay, a security administrator is tasked with hardening a web server. The server hosts a public website and only needs to allow web traffic and secure communication. Which of the following ports should the administrator consider disabling to enhance security? Now, let's take a look at this. So you have to know it's a web server, all right? So there's a couple things here that you have to disable. And I thought this one here was pretty easy. You have to know your port number. You have to know which one relates to secure and insecure protocols. Now, right off the bat, you cannot disable 80 and 443. First of all, 443 is the secure SSL, and this is how you connect to the web. This is for your secure web transfer. You need that. You cannot disable 443 once again, so this eliminates this. This has nothing to do with web. Okay, 53 is DNS and 110. All right, so you never disable DNS. First of all, DNS doesn't really have a secure version of it. 110 is, you could disable 110. You could disable 3389. Now, on a web server, we do utilize FTP to get files on and off the web server. And you could use Telnet to log in and administer the server. Don't use FTP. Don't use Telnet. Use SFTP. That's Telnet. That's SSH, right? So if you utilize an SSH, that's going to give you a secure connection to the server. It means that you should disable FTP and Telnet on your machine. That one was a tricky one. I really thought that was a tricky one because some people could have gone with 53, but that's really not doing web stuff. That's DNS and emails. 52. A network administrator is troubleshooting connectivity issues for a workstation. The workstation is connected to a switch. The administrator doesn't know which port the workstation is connected to. Which of the following method would best help the administrator identify the port on the switch? Review the switch MAC address table. Run a packet capture on the workstation. Use port mirror. Reboot the workstation. Well, if you took the course with me and you go through the switching lab, if you haven't taken the course, you got to try this out. We have a great switching lab where I use packet tracer and I show you how to set up a switch and I show you how to run all those show commands. And if you know how to run the show command, if you say show the MAC address table on the switch, it'll tell you what computer, what MAC address connects to what port on the actual switch. You do not need to run any packet capture and a port mirror, and you don't need, rebooting the station is going to do nothing. Only on the switch will tell you. The workstation never knows what ports it's connected to, but the switch knows what station is connected to what port. 53. A network technician is trying to identify the specific port on a switch where an IP phone is connected. The technician wants to use a protocol that allows devices to advertise their identity and capabilities across the network. Which of the following would best help the technician identify the correct port? Now, you have a variety of protocols here. Even if you don't know the answer, truly, because this is a very unique protocol, and if you could have just use your process of elimination, you could have probably got this one right, because DHCP, we went over this, gives out IP address. This is to manage network devices. This is to translate between domain name and IP address. The link layer discovery protocol allows you to find devices on the network. Now, notice allows the device to advertise their identity and capabilities across the network. That is exactly what this does. Notice it's a discovery protocol, allowing devices to tell the network about what they do. 54. A network engineer is inspecting a fiber optic connection and observes that the light signal is bouncing off the protected cladding and allows keyword multiple light paths. Which of the following fiber optic cable is most likely being used? Multi-mode, single mode, copper, or coax. So let's eliminate these two because we're talking about fiber cable. Now, which one is going to allow keyword multiple light paths? Pretty easy one. The single mode fiber, even though it goes farther, it only allows a single path versus multi-mode allows multiple paths. Now, and it does bounce the light off the protective cladding. Pretty easy one. Make sure you know the difference between single mode and multi-mode for your tests. 55. A security administrator is implementing a secure connection between a web server and clients. The administrator uses an X.509 certificate to establish trust between the server and the client. Let me stop right here. Remember, certificates establishes trust between machines. When you go to Amazon, how do you know Amazon is actually Amazon? How do you know that's the Amazon web server? How do you know that's Amazon's public key to start the secure connection? Because Amazon presents a certificate to the browser. Which of the following technologies is most closely associated with an X.509? Which technology issues an X.509 certificates? And that is a PKI or a public key infrastructure. In order to have certificates and implement certificates in your company, you set up a PKI. In other words, you set up a CA or certificate authority to issue certificates. IPsec is used in VPN connections. SSH is used to remotely connect to a machine, but security. WPA2 is how we secure wireless networks. That's wireless encryption. 56. A network administrator needs to securely log into a network switch to perform configuration changes. The administrator wants to ensure the login credentials and the session data, keyword, are encrypted. Which of the following port numbers should the administrator use for encrypted logins? 23, 161, 22, or 80? Best answer here is going to be, did you get it? This is easy. We just went over this actually. 22. This is SSH. 23 is Telnet not encrypted. 161, I forgot. Don't stop the video, I forgot. I think time protocol. All right, guys. I don't memorize all these ports. I do know a lot. I used to be a firewall admin. I used to set up checkpoints, ASAs, ISA servers. You know my famous Sonic wall is sitting over here. So I do know a lot of ports, but I can't remember 161. 80 is obviously HTTP. We want to use an SSH connection. 57. A network technician is managing a network that utilizes 2 internet links to share traffic load for redundancy and perform. The technician needs to determine which link is being used for specific traffic. Which of the following tools will help the technician identify the path the traffic is taken? So this is the main thing. You want to identify what path traffic is taken. What command do you use? So if you want to identify, so if you go to the command prompt right now on a Windows machine and you use the command trace route space Google, or as we say in Windows, trace cert space google.com, it'll tell you the path and all the routers it is taken. SNMP, used to manage your network. Ping is used to test connectivity. And syslog is used to gather all the log files across devices. 58. A network engineer is setting up different methods for sending data across the network. Which of the following data transmission methods is designed to send a single packet to a specific recipient out of many potential receivers? Unicast, broadcast, ARP, and multicast. Now, this one here is pretty easy because it's saying to you that you're basically, hold on, let's put that pin on. You're basically sending out a single packet to a specific recipient. That's a one-to-one connection. So hint the term unicast. Broadcast is one-to-all. ARP is address resolution protocol. This is IP to MAC address that has nothing to do with sending data out. Multicast is one-to-many connections. 59. A video streaming service wants to deliver live video to a group of users who have subscribed to them. Which of the following transmission method would best ensure that only the subscriber receives the video? So in this one, it's one server sending out to many, not all the devices. So in this particular one, you would have a unicast, which is a one-to-many connection. Unicast is one-to-one. Broadcast is one to all the people on the network. And TCP is a transmission control protocol. This allows you to check and check any kind of errors in the packet error connection. Remember, TCP is generally compared to UDP. That's not what they're talking about here. 60. A system administrator is configuring a hypervisor to allow virtual machines to communicate across different networks and with external networks. The administrator wants to enable routing between these networks, but without using a dedicated virtual router. Which of the following technologies is better allowed the administrator to implement the router in the hypervisor? NAT, NFV, VLAN trunking, or bridging the virtual NICs. Now, this one we do cover in the course. You have to know cloud-based technology, especially in today's cloud world. And the answer here is going to be the network functions virtualization. This is when you start virtualizing what was hardware-based functions. Virtualization of routing, virtualizations of different kinds of switching is what you're doing here. NAT is one IP to multiple IPs. VLAN trunking passes VLAN information, and bridging the NIC card combines them. In this one here, we still want the functionality of routing, but we want to do it virtually. 61. A company is developing a disaster recovery plan and wants to ensure business continuity in case of a major incident that impacts its primary data center. The company needs a secondary site. The company needs a secondary site that can be up and running, listen to this, as quickly as possible with minimal downtime. So we need something up quick, no downtime. Which of the disaster sites would meet this? Cold, warm, hot, cloud backup. Now, the moment you saw this as up and running as quickly as possible, you automatically know the answer should have been easy enough, hot site. A cold site, now what they're talking about here is disaster recovery sites. If your main site goes down, your backup site comes online. Think about this for a second. If it takes a while to bring up let's say your main site goes down, and it takes a while to bring up your backup site, you could lose potential customers. Your website can be offline. Your entire network can be offline. Your whole company can drop. So you want to bring it up as early as possible. Companies that elect to go to cold site, they can be down for weeks. Warm site can be down for a few days, and a hot site can be up and running in a couple of minutes. Cloud backups, this is just a backup. That's just storing backups. That's not about sites. 62. A data center manager is designing a new server room and wants to prioritize maximum thermal disposition. Disanticipation. Disposition. I can't pronounce that word. Scratch it off. To ensure the servers run efficiently without overheating. Which of the following setups should the manager implement if the thermal, can't pronounce that word, is the highest concern? By the way, don't laugh at me, guys. Don't laugh. I'll be honest with you guys. I learned how to speak correctly until I was about in 4th grade. All right. So I had to take special education classes, and I had a speech impediment for not most of my life, but since I was very young. So until today, it's kind of hard to pronounce certain words for me. But 99% of my vocabulary is good now. It just took a while to get there. All right, so let's go back to this. We're talking about, they're looking at a data center, server room, and they want to make sure that they manage heat correctly. Now, what is the highest concern? Hot aisle, cold aisle configuration, active passive configuration, red aisle, blue aisle, north side, south side. So what they're talking about here is going to be what's known as hot aisle, cold aisle. So if you ever see the pictures of those giant server rooms as you're walking down the aisles, those things have two aisles, what's called a hot aisle and a cold aisle. Here's how they work. And they have to have two aisles. The reason is because, so when you look at a rack mount server, okay, the back of the machine is pushing out air. The front of the machine is intaking air. The back of the machine is pushing out hot air in the back. And in the front of the server, there's cool air coming in. So the machine is basically have an intake fan in the front of the server that pulls in cool air, and the fans at the back of the machine pushes out hot air. This is how your machine is right now. If you have a desktop, put a piece of paper in front of it, you'll notice it's sucking in the paper. Push it to the back of it, it pushes it out. So you have what's called a cold aisle in the front of the server. That way, cold air goes into the server. And then at the back of the rack of the machines, you have hot air being exhausted out. That hot air is then captured, cooled, and then pushed back to the front. Here in hinted term, hot aisle, cold aisle. Active passive is used in load balancing. Sometimes they do reference them as hot, as blue aisle, red aisle, but it's mostly known as hot and cold aisle. North side, south side is how we enter data centers. Not what we're doing here. 63. A consumer reports that their office has lost connection to the telephone system. The network technician needs to troubleshoot the issue and identify the root cause. The telephone system uses VoIP and is integrated with the company's network. Which of the following troubleshooting steps should it perform first? So remember, keyword is first. Upgrade the firmware on the network switches. Perform a factory reset on the VoIP system. Review the call logs on the VoIP server. Check the physical connection on the phones. So if you are a technician and you got somebody with a VoIP phone that is having a problem with the phone, right? Notice has lost connection. All right, somebody call, I can't, my phone is not connected. What's the first thing you do? Check the connections. Maybe the person kicked it out. All right. In the CompTIA objectives, when you're solving a problem, always check the simplest thing first. Before upgrading firmware, factory reset the VoIP, not even the phone, the whole VoIP system. That erase all the configuration. Reviewing call logs on the VoIP server, no, just go make sure it's plugged in. That would be the first thing you do. Remember, when it comes to troubleshooting, do the first easiest thing first. A network technician is installing a new fiber optic cable to connect various equipment in the data center. The technician is using a fiber patch panel to manage these connections. Which of the following connector is most likely to be used in the fiber patch panel? RJ45, LC, BNC, DB9. Now, if you know you're connecting, really easy, because RJ45 is twisted pair, BNC is coax, this is a serial cable, DB9. LC, or the loosened connector, is used on fiber optic cables, so it's things like SC and so on. 65. A network administrator is setting up DNS records for a company's website. The administrator wants to create an alias, keyword alias, for the primary domain name, so that multiple subdomains can point to the same web server without using a separate A record. What type of DNS record should the administrator use? Now, if you took the course, we did create one of these records. You must first have an A record for it, and then you're going to create an alias record, also known as a CNAME record, or chronological name. This is mail server. This points the domain to an IP or computer to IP. A pointer record is a reverse of the A record. This is an IP to a name versus name to IP. So CNAME or alias. 66. A network administrator is setting up a new file server in a network that uses DHCP for IP address assignments. The server must always be accessible using the same IP address. Which of the following should the administrator configure to ensure the file server has a consistent IP address? Now, although I do disagree with this question, they should just put a static IP. They haven't. They're using a DHCP for our address, but they always want this server to have that IP at all times. Easiest way to do that is to set a reservation. Static assignment. Now notice, the best answer would be to put a static assignment on a server. The problem is you can't do that because they're using DHCP on this. If they put a static IP address and they use DHCP, you're going to have an IP conflict because the DHCP server is not going to know that machine has a static, is going to give out the IP address. So that's not it. Increase the lease time is going to do nothing with who gets what IP. Dynamic DNS updates is just if the machine changes, it updates the DNS. That has nothing to do with this. So you want a reservation. The way reservations work, and we generally do this for printers in particular. We're going to take a MAC address and we're going to give it to the DHCP server. And we're going to say, if you ever see this MAC address, give it this address. That means that this machine will always get this address. This is really useful. It's almost the same as a static IP, but you're doing it from the DHCP server versus giving the machine a static IP. 67. A network administrator is troubleshooting intermediate Wi-Fi connectivity issues in an office located near a break room with several microwaves. The administrator suspects that microwaves are causing interference. Which of the following frequency bands is most likely affected by microwaves? So basically, which one of these things is most likely affected by microwave signals? If you study wireless, you already know when it comes to wireless, we're not talking things like phones and stuff like that. Is 2.4. 2.4 is heavily affected. In fact, if you're in a big building right now, you live in an apartment building, use the 5 gigahertz spectrum. You'll generally know there's less interference on it. You should get basically a better connection on that. So go with 5 gigahertz, but they want something that's what's affected by microwave. And 6, we're not going to, 2.4 is a lot, then everything else is generally okay. 68, a company is designing a new network to ensure high availability and fault tolerance. The network must be able to continue operating even if one device or even if one connection or device fails. Which of the following topologies would best meet the company's requirement? So in this one, they're looking at if one of the connection fails, they can still communicate. So which one has redundant connection? Well, a star is one connection. A bus is also one connection. A mesh has redundant connection as everything connects to everything. And a ring is actually, if a connection fails a ring, the entire ring can drop. 69. A small business is setting up a simple and cost-effective network for its office. The network design needs to be easy to install and troubleshoot. With all devices connecting to a central switch, which of the following topologies should the business choose? Star, mesh, star, ring, and bus. Now, you notice it particularly says here that we want a centralized switch. So if you're using a central switch, you want to make sure that you implement a star network. A mesh is when all devices connect to each other. A ring does not use a centralized switch. And a bus basically has a single cable and people go off of the cable. Best answer here is a star network. Now, all the networks that we have set up today, especially on wired network I'm talking about, almost all of it is basically star networks. The only time you really use a mesh is when you have like WAN connections connecting multiple sites together. 70. A network administrator notices unusual traffic on the network where certain packets are marked with multiple network tags that attempts to manipulate network segmentations. The administrator suspects this is part of an attack to bypass security. Which of the following is most likely occurring? VLAN hopping, MAC flooding, ARP spoofing, DHCP starvation. Now, we want to review a couple things from the question. The packets are tagged with multiple network tags, and they're trying to manipulate segmentation. So with that in mind, what they're trying to do is hop the VLAN. So generally, when you segment a network with VLANs, and one of the best ways to segment network is with VLANs, traffic from VLAN A should never enter traffic in VLAN B unless they start tagging the traffic and confusing the switch. What they're doing is they're hopping over. They're allowing what I said you shouldn't do. You shouldn't go from A to B unless the administrator allows it. So with VLAN hopping, it's a kind of an attack where they're basically getting data and sending data across multiple networks or across the different VLANs. This is not MAC flooding. This is flooding the CAM table or the MAC address tables. ARP spoofing. This is changing MAC addresses on the MAC address table. This is changing the IP to MAC address tables. That's the ARP table. DHCP starvation is when they suck up all the DHCP server addresses so no one gets any particular address. 71. A network engineer is configuring the company's network to ensure that voice and video calls receive higher priority over general web browsing. Which of the following techniques should the engineer implement to prioritize traffic based on its type? Now, you want to remember that when you implement VoIP in a network, that voice, quote unquote, voice data is going to compete with normal data or data. So for example, In your network right now, you may be surfing the internet, downloading the file, watching some movies. But then you pick up on your phone, you got a VoIP call. And you want to make sure that when somebody has a VoIP call going on, there is no delay of packets. It's okay to download a file and wait for the packets to arrive, not as quick or not instant, but it is not acceptable for your voice to be broken up. So we want to prioritize our voice data over our data. The protocol that allows us to do that is called QoS. So QoS, or the quality of service, allows us to prioritize one set of traffic over another. Network address translation, this is only going to be used to give one public IP to multiple private. Basically translates between public and private IP addresses. Port mirroring allows one port to receive all traffic on a switch. STP is used to prevent switching loops. This is the span and tree protocol. 72. A network administrator wants to ensure that only authorized devices can connect to specific switch ports in the office. The administrator needs to restrict access by limiting the number of MAC addresses that can connect to each port. Which of the following features should the administrator enable to accomplish this? So if you want to go into a switch right now and say, this port, because maybe you have this switch here and you're saying, well, this port can only accept this MAC address and this can only accept this MAC address. That is a feature we call port security. So port security allows me to assign a particular MAC address to a port. VLAN tagging, they should be doing this to tag the VLAN to the frame so the switch knows what VLAN this frame belongs to. That has nothing to do with the MAC address here. DHCP snooping, this is looking for DHCP servers. This has to do with the server itself. And STP, we just mentioned, this is going to be utilized to prevent switching loops. Span and tree protocol. 73. Getting tired here, guys. My legs are starting to feel it. If you guys appreciate me doing this video, I would really like if you can give me a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. Also, if you comment on it and tell me what you liked about the video so far, would be greatly appreciated. 73. When installing network equipment on a building, which of the following are the most important environmental factors to ensure optimal operations and longevity of the device? Let me tell you guys something. When it comes to network devices like this, if you want these devices, 20 years, I've seen some switches go. The most important thing when it comes to these devices, by the way, you got to select two, is going to be, and I'm telling you guys, really important, is going to be, number one, is temperature. These devices overheat. If these devices overheat, they will blow up. They'll short out. They'll die. They'll overheat and die. So temperature is number one. Rack size don't matter here. Humidity. Low humidity, you have static electricity that'll destroy the device. High humidity, condensation. So you don't want that. Cable management, you can have really bad cabling. I have pretty bad cable management. It's really not going to affect the longevity. Dust filtration system was a good answer. But a lot of these devices already have things that a lot of them have like meshes and things like that. Power, this is not going to really, a lot of these devices should be connected to UPSs. So that's not really going to affect it too much. This is backup power, not primary power. All right, good answer there. Let's go to 74. By the way, how are you guys doing so far? You guys getting, have you got more than 60, 70%? Hopefully you're doing great. I know you got this. You guys can do this. A network administrator needs to troubleshoot a connectivity issue with a remote file server. The administrator suspects that certain ports may be closed, preventing access. Which of the following tools should the administrator use to identify which ports are open on the file server? So what should the administrator use? So we want to see what port is open or closed. Best answer here that tells us this. I did do this with you on your labs. If you did the labs in the course, you got this one. It's pretty easy. The Nmap command and or command line tool or graphical interface tool shows you exactly what ports are open on a machine. NS lookup finds the DNS server. Ping tests connectivity. Trace route. What this does is it tells you the path the data is taken. 75. A user reports that they cannot access a company website as the URL resolves to the wrong IP. It's not good. Other users in the office have no issues to the website. Which of the following should the administrator check first? Now, it's only for this user, right? So the DNS cache on the user's computer, the company's DNS server, the routing table on the user's computer, the DHCP lease time. Best answer here, pretty easy one. You notice that it's not everybody, it's just this person. So you should have eliminated this. If it's a DNS server, everybody's connected to that server, everybody's gonna have a problem. The DHCP has nothing to do with the resolution. The routing table, well, this is gonna say when they wanna go outside of the network. This is a resolution problem, not a routing problem. So more than likely the user has a cache problem. In other words, I had mentioned earlier in the video that when you resolve a domain name to an IP, it caches it in your DNS server cache. The DNS server cache, if you want to see it, you do ipconfig/display DNS. They edit, malware in particular, edits that cache and points things like google.com or yahoo.com to bad IP addresses. So check the cache. How would you check it? Do ipconfig/display DNS. In the lab section of the course, we do review all the switches for ipconfig. 76. A network engineer is reviewing a new network design and notices several redundant links between the switches. The engineer is concerned that the design may result in a network loop, which could cause widespread issues. Which of the following should the network engineer implement to prevent loop in the network? Now, this here we went over. Okay, this here we went over, right? Quite a lot so far. You should have got this one. Because we mentioned already, when you want to prevent a switch and loop, you enable the STP or the span entry protocol. SNMP would monitor devices, not detect actual switch and loops. Static routing, use static routing. You don't do, switches don't route data, so that's completely wrong. Implement QoS. So QoS is going to be how we would prioritize traffic one over the other. 77. A network engineer is reviewing several types of network diagrams while planning a new installation. One diagram contains detail about the physical connections, including the types of connectors and cable used. Which of the following types of diagrams is he reviewing? Logical, patch panel, wiring, IP address. Pretty easy one. Okay, obviously he's looking at cable and he's looking at connectors, he's looking at the cable, so this is going to be the wiring diagram. The patch panel diagram says what devices is connected to the patch panel. Logical diagram shows like the server name and the IP address and what domains they might be in. IP address allocation says what device gets what IP address. 78. A network engineer is tasked with designing a new network using the 3-tier architect model. The engineer wants to ensure that routing between network segments is handled efficiently. At which layer of the 3-tier model should the routing? So where do we do routing? Right, that's the question here. On what layer in that 3-tier layer do we do? Now, the distribution layer is responsible for routing between the different VLANs themselves. All right, notice between different segments. The core layer is where we're going to connect everything around between all the different networks itself. This is how computers access layer is where computers access it. We don't really use the application. The access to core and the distribution is what they're talking about on a 3-layer. 79. What is the primary benefit of using a CDN or content distribution network? Content distribution network balances server load by distributing traffic, caches content, decreasing latency and improving access speed, automatically blocks malicious traffic before reaching the server, reduces cost by eliminating the need for multiple data center. Now, if you use things like YouTube, which everybody uses, you're watching this video, that's all coming from a CDN. What a CDN does is that it caches the content across multiple data center. So let's say you have a video and you want to broadcast this video to the world. If you put that video in a single data center, that means, let's say you're located in Japan. That video now needs, from that single data center, now needs to hit the United States. It needs to hit Europe, it needs to hit South America, it needs to hit Africa, it needs to hit Asia. It's going to be a while. So what you want to do is you want to take that video and you want to cache that video across every continent. So when I access it in the United States, I'm getting the video from the United States, not all the way from Japan, not all the way from around the world. This is the concept of a CDN. It caches the contents across multiple data center, allowing it to be load faster. So it doesn't reduce the need in multiple data center. It doesn't block malicious traffic. Balances served by distributed. That's not a load balancer. It just caches content around multiple servers around the world. Question 80. Guys, we're getting down to the end now. Last 20. A network engineer is designing the backbone for a large enterprise. The backbone will need to support the core infrastructure. Which of the following components are likely to be in the network backbone? Core routers and fiber optic links, access points, firewalls, and wireless extenders, VLANs, and DHCP servers. Now, when you're thinking the backbone of a network, think of where all the main devices connects to, especially your routers, switches, servers that are heavily used, your access points, and those are going to go into more of your distribution, firewalls, and extenders. No, this is where the core routers go. VLANs, the DHCP server and VLANs are all going to go into other layers, distribution layer and the access layer, not the core layer. 81. A network technician is troubleshooting communications between two different resources. The technician needs to verify if the issue is related to a device responsible for directing traffic based on an IP address. At what layer of the OSI model does the device operate? So we're looking at traffic based on an IP address. If we're looking to see what device is going to tell us this, what layer this device should operate at, is definitely going to be layer, correct. 3, the network layer. The network layer passes data based on an IP address. It's where we assign an IP address. Layer 2 is a MAC address. Layer 4 has nothing to do with an IP address, but we do get port numbers. And layer 5 is session layer, manages the communication session. 82, a network administrator is troubleshooting connectivity between two devices. Which of the following protocols is most often used to send error messages and check network reachability? Now, keyword here, you want to check for connectivity. What protocol allows for connectivity check-in? Well, out of these protocols, only one. And what utility do we use? Ping. We ping devices across the network to make sure the device is up. Ping can tell us if their device is working. So we'll check, is it reachable? It could send error messages too. Ping is just a utility. The protocol that ping utilizes is the Internet Control Message Protocol, also known as ICMP. TCP is not used to check network reachability. It's more likely to check has the packet arrived correctly. UDP send data very quickly, but it doesn't really check the error correction. It doesn't have no error correction, error recovery. An ARP is used to translate between an IP and a MAC address. 83. A network engineer is configuring a video conference application that requires real-time communication with minimal delay, even if some data packets are lost. Keyword. Which protocol would be most appropriate for this and why? Now, let's look at this. Real-time communication with minimal delay. Keyword. And it's okay if data is lost. Now, if you go through the choices, you should have eliminated A, TCP because it provides reliable. No, we don't want TCP is going to guarantee the data gets there. No packets is ever lost. So the best answer here is UDP. UDP is actually faster than TCP and it allows real-time connection. TCP doesn't work like this. The problem with TCP is that it sends the data, it has to have acknowledgments of the data that was received. It checks the data to make sure it's good. It has error check and error recovery, and this can slow down data, so it's not meant for real time. In fact, VoIP utilizes UDP and not TCP. So UDP, it doesn't automatically resend. That is a false statement. 84, a network administrator is tasked with segmenting a large office network to reduce broadcast traffic and isolate sensitive data. Which of the following network configuration would best improve both performance and security in this situation? Now, you notice it says here, you want to improve performance and you want to isolate data. Best answer here, guys, is to configure VLANs. Assigning different subnets to each department, that's good. But if it's all on the same router or if it's all on the same switch, it's not going to do good. You have to go into the switch and assign VLANs. Because if you assign everybody on different subnets on the same switch, they can just easily change it and be back in another network. So put them in the right VLAN. That way the switch is segmenting them out. And if you put everybody in the same switch, it wouldn't improve performance. Implementing DHCP on all switches does not segment the switch. SDP prevents switching loop. It doesn't segment the traffic. Question 85, big question. Easy one though. And a company's IT team is looking to move from IPv6 to v4 due to limitations in the current network addressing system. The engineer is asked to explain the fundamental difference between IPv4 and IPv6 to justify the upgrade. Which of the following correctly identifies a key distinction? All right, so this one here you guys should know very well, as we went over this a lot in the course. And what you guys should know right off the bat is IPv4 is a 32-bit address space, and IPv6 is 128-bit. Basically, at the 128, it's like unlimited addresses. That number is really big. I think it's a number with 38 zeros. IPv6 does not require DNS. No, it actually doesn't require DHCP. IPv6 allows devices to communicate without routers, while v4 requires routing between networks. This one here, no, you still use IPv6 routers. There's IPv6 routing protocols also. IPv6 addresses are only used for public. No, you have internal also. 86. A user reports that they cannot reach a web server hosted in another city. The network administrator needs to troubleshoot this issue by verifying connectivity and diagnosing potential problems along the route. Which of the following tools would best help the administrator determine if the issue lies with the server, the network router, or local machine? So this question, you really have to break it down. He wants to verify connectivity, diagnosing potential along the route. Okay? So I think they need ping. Notice and diagnosing problems along the routes. He wants to see the route. The best thing here, so we need two of those. Is the connection going to allow you to open? Troubleshoot issues. So the best answer is, since you already got two, you might as well go with all because you need both of those. So NetStat is going to see if it allows a connection in and out. Best answer here is D. Definitely you need ping and trace route. NetStat is a hit or a miss on this particular one. But since you need B, A and B guarantee, you can't answer the question without A and B, you might as well go with D, which is the best answer here. 87. A network administrator needs to troubleshoot intermediate network issues by capturing and analyzing traffic. The administrator wants to monitor traffic without interrupting the network. Which of the following configurations would be best suited for this task? Enabling port mirroring, configuring a VLAN, enabling DHCP snooping, and using segmentation. Now, if somebody wants to monitor your network traffic, they have to gather the network traffic. The best thing here you're going to do is enable port spanning. With port spanning, you configure, basically, you take a switch and you would configure one of these ports to be a span port. Now, with all traffic from the other ports would send the data here. That way the administrator gets a copy of all traffic on the network that is port spanning. Configure a VLAN. No, if you configure a VLAN, it's not going to get traffic from other VLANs. DHCP snooping detects rogue DHCP servers. Use network segmentation to isolate the issue. No, so if you segment it, you're not going to be able to gather all the traffic. 88. A network administrator is configuring an ACL on a network firewall to allow web traffic and block unnecessary or potential harmful traffic. The goal is to permit HTTP and HTTPS while denying all other traffic. Which of the following is best to configure this? This one here, you should have gotten right off the bat. You want to allow HTTP and HTTPS. So what you want to do is you want to allow port 80, HTTP, port 443, HTTPS. This is DNS and SMTP, right? 5325. 22 SSH 3389 remote desktop, that's not what they want, and never allow all ports open. Pretty easy one. 89, a network engineer has designed the network layout for a large office building. The office requires multiple wiring closets to ensure efficient data flow throughout the building. The engineer decides to install an intermediate distribution frame. All right, that's what that means. In each floor's wiring closet, which is the primary purpose of the IDF, to serve as a main point for external internet. To reduce the distance, the data must travel by acting as a secondary hub to manage VLAN assignments or to automatically assign IP address. Now, IDF connects, the intermediate distribution frame connects to the main distribution frame, or the MDF. The MDF is where all of the main things that's coming outside is going to connect to. This is where things like your main internet connections is going to go into. The core switches live here. The core routers live here. And then you have IDFs on each floor that connects into the main distribution frame. The reason they do this is so that the data doesn't have to travel all the way from the workstation all the way down into the basement or into the top floor or middle floor of the MDF. Best answer. A describes the MDF, not the IDF. It doesn't do VLAN assignments, and it doesn't assign IP address. That's a DHCP. 90. A cloud service provider wants to implement a solution that allows for flexible deployment and management of network services, okay, without relying on traditional hardware appliance. Which of the following technologies? So when you're thinking about, okay, we don't want to rely on traditional appliances such as a router or the physical switch I have in my hands, then you have to virtualize that function. Network virtualization, network functions that's virtualized, or NFVs. So you're going to virtualize switch, virtualize routers, virtualize firewalls. All cloud providers utilize this. They're not going to have physical routers and switches if all the machines are just virtual. QoS prioritizes traffic. Load balancers distribute traffic across multiple servers, and VLANs will segment traffic. 91. A network administrator is configuring a wireless network to support different types of authentication, including certificates and passwords. The administrator wants a protocol that can handle various authentication methods to provide flexibility. Which of the following protocol is best suited for the requirement? PAP, EAP, CHAP, or Radius. Now you notice they want something that supports certificates and passwords. The only authentication method that supports various types, such as certificates, biometrics, even passwords, is EAP, or Extensible Authentication Protocol. Password Authentication Protocol, put an X on that, excuse me, that's actually just password-based. CHAP is actually password-based. Radius is basically a centralized server used to centralize authentication across, whether it's VPNs, whether it's wireless, and it utilizes authentication methods like EAP. Which show command would you use to verify the membership of a switch port in specific network segments, ensuring that each port is correctly grouped according to the intended configuration? Show MAC address table, show VLAN, show interface, show config. Now, I did do a lab. You guys need to do the lab in the course where we go through all the switch commands on the Cisco switch. On my exam, I had a performance-based question, or PBQ, and you had to utilize the show commands in order to answer the question. I'm not going to give away the question before CompTIA crucifies me, but you need to know those show commands. I do all the show commands with you in the lab. The answer here is actually VLAN. Show MAC address table is actually going to show you what port has what MAC address. So that's not what they want. They want to show what switch ports belongs to a segment. You think segments, think VLAN. Show interface shows me if the interface is up and down. The interface may have like a virtual IP on it. Show configuration shows what configs you have put into the switch, such as the switch name, VLAN information, IP address and information, and so on. 93. Which command line tool would you use to display active network connection on listening ports? If you have a Windows box and you want to see what ports are open and what connection is going out there, use the command called netstat. Netstat is a command that allows you to see all active network connection. Dig, this is a Linux command to find DNS servers. ipconfig, Windows command that allows you to see your current IP, your IP address configuration, such as what's your IP, what's your subnet, what's your default gateway. Ping will test connectivity. 94, which of the following command line is primarily used to verify the reachability of a host on a network? What command will we use to see can we reach a host? Easy question, pretty much a giveaway at this point, is ping. Ping allows me to reach, see if can I reach that machine. Don't forget, ping utilizes the protocol, the ICMP protocol. Now, netstat is used to see is the connection, are connections open and closed. TCP dump will dump the log files of machines, in particularly the memory files. ARP shows you your IP address to MAC address translations. 95. What is the best course of action if a network port is found to be administratively down but needs to be reactivated? Well, if the port is administratively down, you have to go and turn the port on. If you do the lab with me, this is an easy one. If you do the lab with me, the routing lab in particular, if you do the routing lab, you'll see in order to turn the port on, I need to go to the port and say what? Could you remember? I have to say no shutdown. So if you go to the port on the configuration of the Cisco router, if you go into the port and you type no shutdown, do config T, do the interface, go into the interface, but do no shutdown. It'll turn the interface on. So that'll be no shutdown is the best answer here. There's no such thing as reactivate, enable, or restore. None of those exist. 96. Which of the following best describes the role of radius? It is primarily used for directory, services, and user management. It provides single sign-on. It's a protocol for centralized authentication, authorization, and accounting. It offers secure token base. Now, this one I just covered actually. So a radius, remote access dial-in user services, is what radius stands for. I know it says dial-in, but we don't use it for dial-in anymore. In today's world, where do we use radius? In today's world, we set up a radius server, and then things like wireless computers, VPN machines can connect and authenticate through the radius server versus having like a password to connect. So what this does is that it helps us centralize the authentication, and it can do authorization, saying what resource can access what, or what user can access what resource. And it does the accounting, so it has like log file tracking. Is primarily used for directory services and user management? No, that's LDAP. That's Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. Think Active Directory. It's not an SSO. SSO would be things like Kerberos or SAML. It offers secure token-based authentication. That's more like EAP, or Extensible Authentication Protocol. 97. A company is implementing a high availability solution where multiple servers handle requests simultaneously, ensuring that if one fails, the other continues to provide uninterruptible services. Which configuration are they most likely using? Now, the key word here is that they're handling the requests at the same time. That means that the machines, this is a type of a load balancer. This load balancer is an active load balancer. That means in this type of load balancing, what you're doing, or this type, I should say, cluster, what you're doing in this cluster is that you have two machines and they handle, let's say, 200 requests. They're handling both at the same time, all 200 at the same time. Versus in an active passive, one machine takes on all the requests, the other one sits there until this one dies. Round robin is when you take one, then you take one, then you take, it goes around a room. It's not what they want. They want them both at the same time taken on at the same time. Failover is when one dies, the other one kicks in. 98. An IT team wants to predict how often their systems might fail during operation. Which metrics is best? Mean time to repair, recovery time objective, mean time between failure, recovery point objective. Answer here, guys, is mean time between failure. This tells you how long in between fixture and failure does a device have. This is the best answer here. Mean time to repair. All this one is going to do is tell you how long it takes to repair a device. Recovery time objective and point objective deals with how fast we can recover systems, how long they can be down, how much data we're willing to lose. 99, oh boy, 2 more to go, guys. What metrics is commonly used by RIP routing? So when we use the RIP routing protocol, what is the metric they're going to use to determine the fastest path? RIP uses, easy one, hop counts. Bandwidth is used by link state. It doesn't use delays or load. It doesn't care about all of that. It only cares about how many hops between this route and the other route. Okay, an easy one here. Which of the following CIDR notations represents the subnet with the most usable? Which one will give you the most usable IPs? If you use a 16, a 24, a 28, and a 32. Well, if you remember from IP addressing, the smaller the CIDR, the more IPs you get. In fact, with a /16, you're going to get 65,000 plus machines. /8, you get like 16 million machines. /24, you're going to get 254 machines. So remember, as these numbers are going up, the number of usable IPs are dropping, making A the correct one. Wow, that was a long one. This video is really, really long. Guys, this took an enormous amount of time to put together. It took an enormous amount of time. In fact, I messed this up quite a bit, and there were a lot of retakes on certain questions. If you guys really appreciate what I do, subscribe to the channel, give the video a like. If you're studying for your Network Plus, consider a few things. Number one, check out my course, links in the description below. They're priced really well. They cover every single thing in the exam objectives. It's a top seller on all platforms that it's placed on. Check out my practice questions, much more. I have more than 500 or more of these questions that covers all the exam objectives. We did not cover every single one of the exam objectives, but my practice questions will. If you do my practice questions, you can get at least an 80%. You're going to do well on your exam. Out of these 100 questions, if you could have scored at least an 80%, I think you're going to be okay for your test. But remember, I didn't cover every single one of the exam objectives, and the real exam might cover all of them, or ones I didn't even cover. So please get the practice test. And I have a free Network Plus study guide. Check in the links below. I have a video where I give away a free Network Plus study guide. Even if you don't like me, it's absolutely free. Just download it and read it, and you'll probably do fine on your exam. Guys, if you really enjoyed this, check out all the videos on the channel. And hopefully I'll see you again real soon in the future. And with that in mind, I wish you the absolute best of luck on your exam. I know you can do it. Just be dedicated, study hard, study well, and I'll see you in the next video.